They sat me next to the trash cans at my own sister's wedding. Not a joke. Not a mistake. When I arrived at that glass ballroom overlooking the Vermont lake, dressed in my wine-colored gown with a carefully wrapped gift in my hands, the coordinator checked her clipboard and said, "You're listed for hallway seating." She pointed to a folding table by the service doors, right next to where the staff dumped melting ice and leftover champagne bottles. Through the glass, I could see everything. The chandeliers. The orchids floating in crystal bowls. My mother in champagne silk. My father straightening his tie. And Eliana, my sister, glowing in white like she'd swallowed the sun. She looked right at me through that glass and smiled. The kind of smile you give to strangers you'll never remember. That's when I knew. This wasn't about seating arrangements or wedding logistics. This was the truth, finally written down on a chart for everyone to see. In my family, I didn't count. My name is Rowan Brennan. And this is the story of how I stopped being invisible. But let me back up, because you need to understand how we got here. Growing up, Eliana and I were the walking cliché you see in those perfect family portraits. The golden child and the quiet one. She had the ribbons, the trophies, the tears that got her rescued every single time. I had report cards nobody looked at and problems I learned to fix myself. Mom called me the easy one. Dad said I was independent. Both meant the same thing. I was convenient. Invisible was convenient. The thing about being the easy child is that nobody tells you it's a trap. They praise you for not needing attention, for solving your own problems, for never making a fuss. And you learn to wear that badge with pride, thinking you're somehow superior for not being needy like your sibling. But here's what they don't tell you: easy children don't get remembered. They get overlooked. And by the time you realize the difference between independence and neglect, you've already spent 20 years making yourself smaller. I remember being 8 years old, coming home with a perfect score on a math test I'd studied for all week. I was so excited to show Mom. But when I walked into the kitchen, Eliana was crying because she'd gotten a B- on a spelling quiz. Mom spent the next hour consoling her, promising ice cream, calling it just a bad day. I put my test on the counter. Nobody looked at it. The next morning, I found it in the recycling bin, buried under junk mail. That's when I learned the first rule of being the invisible child: your victories don't count if nobody's watching. And nobody was ever watching me. The last time I saw my whole family together was Thanksgiving, 3 years before the wedding. Eliana was off in Portugal with her new boyfriend, and for once, the house felt lighter. Like I could actually breathe without taking up someone else's space. Mom asked me to grab an old photo album from her vanity drawer. Simple request. But when I opened that drawer, I found something else. A small brown journal, edges soft from years of being held. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. Every single page started the same way. Eliana's first day of kindergarten. Eliana's favorite meal. Eliana's college acceptance letter. Page after page after page. Birthdays, achievements, random Tuesday afternoons where Eliana said something cute. Not one line about me. Not my name. Not my birthdays. Nothing. I stood there in that bedroom for what felt like an hour but was probably only minutes, flipping through years of documentation. My mother's handwriting, careful and loving, preserving every moment of one daughter's life while the other daughter simply wasn't worth the ink. When I asked Mom about it later, she smiled like I'd asked the silliest question in the world. You never needed the attention, honey. You were always fine. Always fine. As if being fine was the same as being loved. That's when I learned something important. There are two kinds of forgotten. There's being lost, where people are looking for you but can't find you. And then there's being erased, where you were never written down in the first place. I thought about that journal a lot over the next 3 years. Thought about it during family calls that went straight to voicemail. Thought about it when Eliana got engaged and I found out through Facebook. Thought about it when the wedding invitation arrived, my name spelled wrong. And I definitely thought about it when I walked into that Vermont resort, 3 hours up from Boston, with Mom's last text still burning in my mind. Please, Rowan. No drama today. It's Eliana's day. Like I was a warning label. A potential problem to be managed. I'd driven up alone, which wasn't surprising. Nobody had offered to ride with me. Nobody had asked where I was staying. The night before, I'd called to confirm my +1, and Mom had gone quiet on the other end of the line. "Oh, honey," she'd said, like she was breaking bad news. "We had to make some cuts to the guest list." You understand. I understood perfectly. Eliana got a +1. I got a folding chair in the hallway. The hallway where they seated me wasn't quiet. Staff kept pushing through the service doors, wheeling bins of ice, laughing under their breath. Every time those doors swung open, I got flashes of the real wedding. Chandeliers glittering. Dresses swaying. My mother's hand resting on Eliana's shoulder like a crown. I tried to disappear, like always. Told myself the same lies I'd been telling for years. It's fine. You don't need them. But here's the thing about lies. Eventually, your body stops believing them even when your mouth keeps saying them. I was sitting there, watching my reflection in the glass, when Eliana came walking toward me. Bouquet in one hand, veil trailing behind her like smoke. She stopped just outside the doorway, and I could see both versions of her. The adored bride inside the ballroom, and the cruel sister standing in front of me. She tilted her head, that practice gesture I'd seen 1,000 times. "Well," she said, her voice sweet as poison. "Looks like they've finally figured out where you belong." I blinked. What's that supposed to mean? Her smile widened. That same smile from childhood, right before she'd steal whatever spotlight I'd managed to find. "Guess you don't count." 4 words. Soft as a whisper. Sharp as a blade. For a second, I couldn't breathe. My throat went completely dry, that kind of dryness that comes from swallowing too much pride for too many years. Behind her, the photographer was calling out. "Bride, we need you back for the shot." She didn't move. She wanted me to react. To cry. To beg. To prove her point one more time. I didn't give her that satisfaction. Instead, I looked at her long enough for her smile to twitch. "There's always been space for both of us," I said quietly. "You're the one who keeps shrinking it." Her eyes went cold. "Oh please, Rowan. Not everything's about you. This is my day. You could at least pretend to be happy for once." I let out a small laugh, the kind that sounds like air escaping through a crack. "You made sure I couldn't even sit in the same room." What exactly am I celebrating? For just a moment, the mask slipped. I saw something flicker across her face. Fear, maybe. Then she straightened up, lifted her chin higher. "You always twist things." Maybe Mom was right. You make everything difficult. Mom. That word hit harder than I expected. "I'm not difficult," I said. "You just don't like that I see things the way they are." She rolled her eyes, already turning away. "You sound just like Dad. Pathetic and bitter. Face it, Rowan. Nobody needs your approval. Not here. Not ever." She walked back into the ballroom, her white gown brushing the floor, leaving nothing but perfume and contempt in the air. I watched her go, felt that familiar burn behind my eyes. But this time, something was different. It didn't hurt the same way. It burned cleaner, sharper, like something cauterizing a wound that had been bleeding for decades. I picked up the small silver box from my table, the gift I'd wrapped the night before with careful, patient hands. I traced the ribbon once, feeling the weight of it. Then I slipped it into my bag. If they didn't want me inside, fine. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed this time. Let me tell you what was in that box. Because this is where the story really begins. 3 weeks earlier, I'd run into one of Eliana's old coworkers at a cafe in Boston. Just a casual lunch, nothing planned. We got to talking, and she got comfortable. Too comfortable. She told me Eliana had been bragging for months about her engagement. About how easy it was to manipulate Callum, her fiancé. "He's so sweet," Eliana had apparently said, but naive. A few fake tears and I get the house, the money, the last name. My coffee went cold while she talked. Eliana had joked about getting him to sign a prenup that favored her. About moving our parents into the guest house once Callum was settled. About how this wedding was basically her retirement plan. The coworker showed me her phone, scrolling through message after message. I sat there, watching my sister's words appear on that screen, and felt something shift inside me. Not anger, exactly. More like clarity. The kind you get when you finally see something you've known all along but refuse to acknowledge. My sister wasn't just selfish. She was calculating. And Callum, this man who'd apparently done nothing but love her, was just another target. Does he know? I'd asked. The coworker shook her head. Nobody knows. That's the thing about Eliana. She's really good at making people see what she wants them to see. I thought about that for a long time after. About how Eliana had spent her whole life performing, and everyone in our family had given her a standing ovation. While I'd spent mine being real, being honest, being fine, and nobody had noticed at all. The coworker had screenshots, messages, receipts. I hadn't planned to use any of it. Honestly, I'd just filed it away in my brain under more proof your sister is awful. But sitting in that hallway, next to those trash cans, with her words still ringing in my ears? Plans changed. I stood up slowly, smoothed my dress, and walked back toward the reception entrance. The wedding planner was busy fussing over centerpieces, not paying attention. I moved quickly, quietly. I placed the silver box right on top of the gift pile. The label was neat, deliberate, to Eliana and Callum. Inside was a crystal frame. And underneath it, a folded note with printed screenshots of every message her coworker had shown me. Not a threat. Not revenge, really. Just the truth. I checked my reflection one last time. Straightened my shoulders. My heart wasn't racing. It was steady. Calm in a way I'd never felt before. Then I walked out into the Vermont evening. The lake shimmered under the lights, beautiful and cold. Behind me, I could hear the faint echo of clapping. The crowd cheering for a first dance I no longer cared to watch. For the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel small. I reached my car, gravel crunching under my heels like punctuation at the end of a very long sentence. No dramatic speech. No goodbye. Just the quiet sound of a car door closing. As I started the engine, I looked back once at those glowing windows, at the silhouettes moving behind glass. And I whispered to myself, let the truth find its way. Inside that ballroom, everything was still perfect. The saxophonist hit soft notes. Glasses clinked. People pressed closer around the dance floor to watch Eliana and Callum's first dance. She glowed in that heavy white gown, the picture of perfection she'd been rehearsing for months. Callum spun her once, twice, camera flashes painting everything gold. From outside, through those tall windows, it looked like a snow globe. Sealed. Flawless. Unreal. Then someone opened the silver box. It happened near the gift table. A cousin had started gathering presents, sorting through bows and ribbons for photos. Someone suggested, let's have them open one now. Just a spur-of-the-moment thing for the guests. Eliana laughed, playing along. She tugged the ribbon free, let the paper fall away, lifted the lid. Inside was the crystal frame. And beneath it, the folded note. Her hand hesitated. What's this? She said. Callum leaned over. The note slid loose and landed face up on the table. His eyes caught the screenshots before she could grab them. He frowned, scanning the text messages printed in pale blue bubbles. One sentence stood out, he's so easy to handle. Cry a little and he buys anything I want. The music didn't stop right away. It just thinned. The violinist stumbled, missing a beat. Eliana's fingers shook. This isn't real. Someone's trying to. Callum didn't answer. He just kept reading. Page after page. Each line worse than the last. Jokes about the prenup. Plans to move her parents in. Complaints about having to pretend to care about his family. That same smirk she'd given me hours earlier, now frozen on her face, brittle and wrong. Who sent this? she hissed. Her mother-in-law, Genevieve, had been watching from across the room. When she heard my name whispered by one of the bridesmaids, her expression hardened. She crossed the floor with slow, certain steps. "I think you should read the rest before you blame anyone," Genevieve said coolly. "These came to me this morning, forwarded from a stylist you hired. Apparently they were in the wrong thread." Eliana's face drained of all color. "That's not possible." Callum's voice came out low and hollow. "It's real, Eliana. The dates match." He turned the final page. A photo of her text, "The house will be mine by Christmas." A collective gasp rippled through the guests. Phones came out. The photographer froze mid-shot. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Eliana lunged for the papers. "You can't show people that." Genevieve stepped between them. "You showed it yourself, sweetheart." That's when the screaming started. Not loud at first. More like air leaving a body too fast. Eliana stumbled backward, the train of her gown catching under her heel. "No. You don't understand. He's lying. She, my sister. She did this." Callum's jaw tightened. Rowan didn't write those messages. She planted them. She's jealous. She's always. "Stop." The single word cracked through the room like a whip. "You did this," Callum said. "You humiliated her today. And you thought no one would ever see who you really are." Every face in that ballroom had turned toward them. The DJ lowered the volume. A child's voice asked, "Mom, what's happening?" Eliana's perfect day was dissolving, and she couldn't hold it together anymore. She spun toward our parents. "Do something." My mother stood pale and stiff near the head table, champagne glass trembling. My father looked at the floor, lips pressed tight. For once, neither of them defended her. "You knew," Callum said quietly, his voice shaking now. "You knew exactly what you were doing." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document. Set it on the table with a soft thud. "This is an annulment petition. I already signed it." Eliana stared at that paper like it was a live wire. "You can't. Callum, you can't humiliate me like this." "I'm not humiliating you," he said. "You did that yourself." Someone turned off the music entirely. The room fell into a silence so deep it buzzed in people's ears. Then came the sound the guests would remember for years. Crystal shattering as the frame hit the floor. Eliana's voice cracked. "She's behind this. Rowan's behind all of it." Genevieve exhaled slowly. "Funny. The only thing your sister did was tell the truth." Outside, I'd stopped my car, engine idling. The glow from the ballroom windows flickered across the dark lake. I couldn't hear every word, but I heard the scream. It came sharp and high, echoing across the water, followed by the dull thud of furniture tipping. The sound I'd waited my whole life to hear. Not out of cruelty, but closure. Inside, Eliana's mascara streaked down her cheeks. "You'll regret this," she shouted, voice breaking. Callum turned away, shoulders heavy. "No, Eliana. You will." He walked off that dance floor, followed by Genevieve. The crowd parted around them like a tide. Mom reached for Eliana's arm. "Sweetheart, maybe we should step outside." "Don't touch me," Eliana cried, pulling free. "You all wanted this. You never loved me enough." Her voice dissolved into sobs. Then my father spoke, quietly, for maybe the first time that entire night. "You should apologize to your sister." The words stunned everyone, even Mom. But Eliana just laughed. A sound so brittle it didn't reach her eyes. "Apologize to her? She's not even family." Dad shook his head slowly. "That's where you're wrong." He left it at that, turned away, shoulders sagging, and followed the crowd toward the exit. By the time the lights dimmed and staff began sweeping broken glass from the floor, Eliana sat alone under that chandelier. Her dress, once dazzling, now looked heavy, wrinkled. The bouquet had fallen beside her chair. The same hands that had pushed me away now clutched at air, desperate for something to hold. "She never saw me," I was already gone. Through my fogged car window, I watched guests hurry out into the parking lot, whispers trailing behind them. It's all over social media already. Did you see his face? That poor girl. No, the other one. The sister. I didn't feel triumph, just quiet. I rested my hand on the steering wheel and thought about that hallway. The smell of lilies and bleach. The folding chair that squeaked when I sat down. How it all started with a seat by the trash cans. How it ended with the truth laid bare in front of everyone who'd ever looked through me. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, now they see you. The scream faded, swallowed by the night. The lake went still again, glassy and calm. I turned the key, headlights washing over gravel, and drove away from the sound of my sister's perfect world collapsing behind me. By the time I reached Boston, the sky was beginning to gray. Highway signs blurred past, the hum of my tires steady and low. Like white noise after years of shouting you've learned to ignore. My phone buzzed nonstop in the cup holder. 16 missed calls from Mom. 3 from Dad. 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I didn't check any of them. The quiet was worth more than explanations. When I stepped into my apartment, it smelled faintly of coffee and rain. The city outside was waking up, headlights flashing across my window. I hung my wine-colored dress on the back of a chair and stared at it. Still flawless. Untouched by the night. It looked like armor I hadn't known I was wearing. A new message appeared on my phone. Please answer, Rowan. We didn't know. That was Mom. She always said that when things finally went wrong. We didn't know. But she had known. All along. Every time she told me to stay quiet. Every time she laughed at Eliana's jokes at my expense. Every time she said, "You're fine." She knew when she wrote page after page about Eliana in that journal and left me out completely. She knew when she seated me in the hallway. She knew every single time she chose one daughter over the other and pretended it was fair. The messages kept coming. Dad's was shorter, call us. We need to talk about what happened. What happened? As if it was some accident. Some unforeseeable event. What happened was 28 years of being erased finally came to light. What happened was Eliana's mask slipped in front of 200 witnesses instead of just me. What happened was the truth, Mom and Dad. That's what happened. I put the phone face down on the counter and opened my laptop instead. A map of Maine blinked back at me, dotted with tiny coastal towns I'd never seen. I picked one at random and clicked book. A week by the water sounded like peace. Before I left for that trip, I stepped out onto my balcony. The city air smelled cleaner than it had in years. Across the river, the morning sun cut the skyline into gold and shadow. They could keep their apologies, their explanations, their versions of the truth. I had mine now. For the first time in my life, silence didn't mean being unseen. It meant being free. Here's what I learned from all of this. You can spend your whole life trying to earn love from people who've already decided you're not worth the effort. Or you can walk away and discover that the love you were chasing was never real to begin with. My family taught me to be small, to be convenient, to be fine. But that night, driving away from that wedding, I learned something more important. I learned that being fine isn't the same as being free. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply refuse to shrink anymore. There's a phrase I kept thinking about during that drive. Don't set yourself on fire to keep others warm. I'd heard it before, but I'd never really understood it until that moment. I'd been burning for years, and my family had simply gathered around the flames, warming their hands, never once asking if I was okay. Well, I was done burning for them. At my sister's wedding, I was seated by the trash cans. This morning, I'm sitting by the river in Maine, listening to waves I never knew I needed to hear. Same silence. Different meaning. Back then, it was humiliation. Now it's peace. Sometimes the loudest revenge isn't a scream. It's the sound of your own footsteps leaving the room. They thought I'd always stay, waiting in the hallway for their approval, grateful for whatever scraps they threw my way. But I don't wait anymore. I don't beg for space at someone else's table. I build my own. If you've ever been pushed aside by the people who were supposed to love you, know this: walking away isn't weakness. It's the beginning of freedom. It's the moment you stop letting other people write your story and start writing it yourself. Thanks for listening, and if this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about finding your voice when the world tries to silence you. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well enough that you no longer need it.